You! Get up! Now! I know what you did. Move! You think you can just sit there? Get up! Get up! You're a damn criminal! Wait, I didn't do anything! Shut up! Hey, watch it! You're coming with me right now!
You told him so!
Get your hands off me! I didn't do anything!
Boots, get on your knees. Right now. Both of you. That was the first thing Officer Grant Callahan said inside Whitfield's family diner at 11:42 on a Thursday night in October, and he said it loud enough that the fry cook dropped a spatula behind the counter. Boots. He did not say hello. He did not ask a single question. He walked in soaked from the rain, hand already resting on his sidearm, and pointed at a corner booth like he was pointing at vermin. Boots. The two people in that booth did not move. Not because they were afraid, because they had been trained, for years, not to give a scared man a reason to feel powerful. Boots. Millbrook Hollow, Georgia. Sat 40 minutes north of Atlanta, the kind of town where the lawns were cut in perfect diagonal stripes, and the homeowners association fined you for leaving a trash can out past 7 in the morning. Boots. Whitfield's diner had been open on the corner of Poplar and 9th since 1987's. A relic of chrome trim and red vinyl booths that the town tolerated the way old money tolerates an eccentric uncle. Boots. The rain that night was the kind that didn't fall so much as attack, hammering the tin awning outside in a rhythm that made the whole building hum. Boots. Inside, at exactly 11:15, a man and a woman had walked through the glass door and taken the booth furthest from the entrance, backs to the wall. Boots. It was a habit. Neither of them could have told you when they'd started doing it. It had simply become part of how they sat in any room, the same way some people cross their legs a certain way without thinking about it. Boots. His name for the next 14 hours was Marcus Boone. Her name was Danielle Reeves. Those were not their real names. Boots. Those had not been their real names for 9 months, ever since the two of them had been folded into Operation Nightfall, a joint federal task force investigation into a narcotics network moving product through 3 counties under the cover of a landscaping business called Ferraro Green Solutions. Boots. The real names, the ones on their federal credentials, the ones their mothers had given them, belonged to Detective Elijah Reid and Detective Naomi Carter, senior investigators with 9 combined years on federal task forces, and, as of that rainy Thursday, less sleep between them than either wanted to admit. Boots. Elijah wore a canvas jacket gone soft and gray at the elbows, a 5-day beard he hadn't planned on, and a slouch in his shoulders that had nothing to do with exhaustion and everything to do with looking like a man the world had already written off. Boots. Naomi's braids were tucked under a faded ball cap, her army surplus coat 2 sizes too big, hiding pressed flat against her ribs under a strip of medical tape, a federal recording device the size of a deck of cards. Boots. It had been switched off since the meeting 3 towns over. The battery, out of habit, was always full. They had not eaten a real meal in 2 days. Boots. That was the whole reason they were there. Not because Whitfield's had anything to prove, not because Millbrook Hollow needed visitors like them, but because Elijah had once, half joking, told Naomi that if he died undercover, it would be from a lack of blueberry pancakes, and tonight he intended to test that theory. Boots. If they've got real maple syrup, he said, staring at a laminated menu with the seriousness of a man reading a verdict, I might actually shed a tear. Boots. I'm not being funny. Keep your voice down, tough guy. Naomi didn't look up from scanning the room, didn't look like she was scanning it, which was the whole skill of it. Boots. We eat, we go quiet, we're back at the safe house by 1. Captain wants us at the briefing by 6, and I need at least 4 hours of sleep before I look at his face again. Boots. Here is the part of the story you should hold on to, because it matters later. On the table between them, spinning lazily under Elijah's fingers, was an old silver dollar, worn nearly smooth, the eagle on its face reduced to a soft gray shadow. Boots. It had belonged to his grandfather, Otis Reid, a patrolman in Macon, Georgia, in 1961, a man who had worn a badge for 22 years and never once made sergeant, passed over 4 separate times by men with half his arrest record and all of his skin tone's advantages. Boots. Otis had given Elijah that coin the day he graduated the academy and said, flip it before you walk into a room you're not sure about. Boots. Not for luck. For a reminder that the coin doesn't care what it lands on. People do. Elijah flipped it once, caught it, and slid it into his jacket pocket. Boots. He had no idea yet how many times that coin was going to matter before the night was over. From the moment the bell over the door had chimed, the diner had gone quiet in that specific, curdled way small rooms go quiet when they've decided who doesn't belong in them. Boots. Conversations dipped, silverware slowed. Boots. Behind the register, the night manager, a reedy man named Walter Higgins, 44 years old. Sweat already beading along his hairline, despite the diner's overworked air conditioning. Wiped the same 6 inches of countertop for nearly 5 straight minutes, his eyes cutting to the corner booth every 8 or 9 seconds like clockwork. Boots. When the elderly waitress, Doris Latimer, picked up a coffee carafe and started toward that booth, Walter caught her wrist. Boots. Not hard, just enough. He shook his head once, sharp, and tilted it back toward the register. Naomi caught the whole exchange in the reflection of the dark window beside her without turning her head. Boots. Don't look now, she said quietly, pretending to examine a chip in her coffee mug. Manager just called off the coffee. Boots. Told the waitress to stay away from us. Elijah didn't turn either. His eyes drifted instead to the black glass, where he could see Walter reaching for the wall-mounted phone, cupping the receiver, whispering fast and urgent into it, while his eyes never left their booth. Boots. 14 months of narcotics work, Elijah muttered, running a hand down his face. Cartel enforcers with automatic weapons, and I'm about to get taken out by a man in a bow tie because I wanted pancakes. Boots. It's Millbrook Hollow. Naomi's voice had gone flat, tired, in a way that wasn't about the hour. We don't look like we belong at the country club. Boots. We look exactly like what we're supposed to look like. He's calling it in, guaranteed. Elijah's jaw tightened, just slightly. Boots. If local PD shows, we hold our covers, no real ID. If our actual names hit dispatch tonight, Ferraro's people find out inside the hour, and 9 months goes in the trash. Boots. We hold the line, Naomi agreed. Her hand moved, almost without her noticing, to rest against the outline of her weapon beneath the coat. Boots. We're 2 annoyed citizens who know their rights. We don't give him a reason. They sat like that for 11 more minutes. Boots. The coffee never came. The rain kept on the tin roof and the diner's remaining patrons. 2 elderly couples. 3 teenagers hunched over a shared plate of fries, kept their eyes down, waiting the way people wait when they can feel a storm about to break indoors instead of out. Boots. Then the bell above the door slammed against the glass, and Officer Grant Callahan walked in. He was 29 years old, built like a man who spent more time in a gym mirror than on patrol, and he wore his uniform creased sharp enough to cut paper. Boots. Callahan had spent his entire 3-year career in Millbrook Hollow, handling noise complaints and shoplifting calls at the Piggly Wiggly on Route 9. Boots. He wanted, badly, to matter, and underneath that wanting sat something uglier. A conviction, quiet and total, that he already knew exactly who belonged in his town and who didn't, and that knowing it made him good at his job rather than dangerous at it. Boots. Walter Higgins practically sprinted from behind the register, jabbing a finger toward the back booth. Callahan's mouth curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. Boots. He adjusted his belt and started down the aisle with the unhurried, showy stride of a man who had already decided how this was going to end. Boots. Naomi saw him coming. Beneath her coat, her thumb found the small hidden switch on the wire and pressed it once. Boots. A tiny pulse against her ribs confirmed it. Live now, transmitting straight to a secure server that fed directly into a command van 22 miles away, where Captain Daniel Reyes was standing over a bank of monitors with a cup of coffee he had forgotten he was holding. Boots. Showtime, Naomi whispered, and let her face fall into a mask of weary indifference. Remember the coin in Elijah's pocket. Boots. Remember Walter's hand on Doris's wrist. Both of those are going to come back before this night is finished. One of them will end a career, and the other will end a business. Boots. But first, you need to watch exactly how far a man will go when he believes, with his whole chest, that no one is going to make him answer for it. Boots. Callahan stopped at the edge of the booth, close enough that his boots nearly touched Elijah's. He didn't greet them. Boots. He didn't ask if they were all right, didn't ask how their evening was going. He simply loomed, using his body the way a bully uses a doorway, to block the exit and announce ownership of the space at the same time. Boots. Evening, he said, loud enough for the whole diner to hear it. What exactly are you 2 doing in here? Boots. Elijah looked up slowly from the menu, his face composed, unreadable. He had sat across tables from men who killed for a living. Boots. A 29-year-old with a fresh haircut and a superiority complex did not move the needle. Ordering dinner, officer, or we would be if anyone would bring us coffee. Boots. Callahan's eyes narrowed. He hated calm. He had built his entire sense of authority on other people's fear, and calm took that away from him before he'd even started. Boots. Manager says you've been loitering. Says you're making customers uncomfortable. His gaze crawled over Elijah's jacket, Naomi's oversized coat. You two don't exactly look like you're from around here. Boots. Since when is eating dinner a crime in Millbrook Hollow? Naomi's voice was level, precise, deliberately clear. We sat down 20 minutes ago. Boots. We haven't spoken to another soul in this room. Is there a statute against a booth now? Callahan leaned in. Boots. Cheap cologne, spearmint gum, and underneath it, something harder, the smell of a man enjoying himself. I ask the questions here. Boots. I need to see identification, both of you now. Officer Elijah kept his hands flat and visible on the table. Boots. With respect, we haven't committed a crime, and we're not suspected of one. Under Georgia law, you're not entitled to demand ID from someone doing nothing but sitting in a public restaurant. Boots. That did it. Color rushed up Callahan's neck, blotchy and furious. He was not used to being corrected. He was especially not used to being corrected calmly by someone he had already decided, in the first 4 seconds of walking through that door, was beneath correcting him. Boots. Let me tell you how tonight's going to go. His hand dropped deliberate to rest on his taser. People like you roll through towns like mine looking to boost a car, case a house. Boots. You match a description we've had circulating. What description? Naomi tilted her head, almost pleasant. Enlighten us, officer. What exactly is the description? Boots. Callahan bent down until his face was inches from Elijah's. 2 suspicious individuals. Uncooperative. Now I'm going to ask one more time before this gets ugly. Hand over your IDs, or I'm pulling you both out of this booth in cuffs. Boots. 22 miles away, in the back of an unmarked command van parked behind a Kroger distribution center, Captain Daniel Reyes set his coffee down without looking at it, his eyes locked on a waveform pulsing across a monitor. Boots. Who is that? He said, not really a question. His communications tech, a 26-year-old named Priya Anand, was already typing. Boots. Running the coordinates now, Captain. It's Whitfield's Diner, Millbrook Hollow. Local PD dispatched a unit 12 minutes ago for a suspicious person's call. Boots. Officer's name is Grant Callahan. He's standing on top of a 9-month federal operation, and he doesn't even know it. Boots. Reyes grabbed the radio off the console, his voice already dropping into the register he used when he needed something done fast and quiet. Boots. Get the Millbrook Hollow chief on a secure line. If Reid and Carter have to break cover to shake this guy off, Ferraro's people will know inside the hour. And we lose this whole operation on a Thursday, because a rookie wanted to feel important. Boots. Chief's line is going to voicemail, sir. It's... Priya checked the clock on the wall. It's 11:51. He's probably asleep. Boots. Reyes swore under his breath and reached for a second handset. Then get me tactical. 3 vehicles, unmarked, code 3. Boots. Nobody puts my detectives in cuffs in a diner. He paused for exactly 1 second, the only sign of how much this was costing him. Boots. Nobody. Back in the booth, the tension had thickened into something the whole diner could taste. Elijah held Callahan's stare without blinking. Boots. To fold now would mean breaking a persona 9 months in the making. To push too hard would hand Callahan the excuse he was clearly hunting for. Boots. We don't have ID on us, Elijah said, letting his voice drop, roughen. Take on the practiced edge of a man who'd learned the hard way not to trust cops with information. Boots. Left it at the house. You want us to leave, fine, we'll leave. But we're not giving you our names for sitting in a booth. Boots. Callahan scoffed, a short, ugly laugh. No ID. Shocking. Stand up, both of you. Out of the booth. Are we being detained, officer? Boots. Naomi asked it clearly, deliberately, her voice carrying straight into the hidden microphone. Every syllable of this exchange was now evidence. A civil rights case and an internal affairs file, assembling itself in real time whether Callahan understood that or not. Boots. You're damn right you're detained. Stand up before I make you. Elijah slid out of the booth first, hands raised to shoulder height, moving with the unhurried deliberation of a man who understood exactly how quickly a room like this could turn violent if he gave it a reason. Boots. He stood to his full height, 6'3" against Callahan's 5'11", and for one flickering half-second, something like doubt crossed the officer's face. Boots. His hand jumped from the taser to the grip of his service weapon and back again. Turn around, hands on the table. Boots. Elijah complied without a word, turning his back, palms flat on the sticky formica. Naomi slid out next, hands visible, moving slow. Boots. The whole diner had gone dead silent, except for the rain hammering the tin roof, and Walter Higgins's ragged breathing behind the register, where he stood watching with an expression that could only be described as satisfaction. Boots. This is the first frozen moment of the night. Nobody in that diner moved. Doris Latimer stood halfway between the counter and the booth with a coffee pot still in her hand, the steam curling off it, going cold. Boots. The 3 teenagers in the corner had stopped eating mid-bite. Even the rain seemed, for one held breath, to pause, and then Officer Grant Callahan reached for his handcuffs, and the moment broke. Boots. He grabbed Elijah's left wrist and wrenched it backward with far more force than the situation required. Every instinct Elijah had years of hand-to-hand training, years of surviving rooms with armed men in them, screamed at him to neutralize the threat. Boots. He held still. His forearm tensed involuntarily against the grip, nothing more than a reflex, and Callahan seized on it instantly. Boots. Stop resisting, he shouted, loud enough to rattle the coffee mugs on the table, though Elijah had barely moved a muscle. Boots. It was a tactic as old as the badge itself, manufacture the narrative before anyone can dispute it. I said stop resisting. Boots. He slammed his forearm into the center of Elijah's back, shoving him hard against the booth's edge. Hey! Naomi's voice cracked through the room, sharp with practiced outrage. Boots. He's not fighting you. You're hurting him for nothing. Shut up and step back! Callahan snapped one cuff shut, twisting it hard enough to bite into skin, and locked the second, wrenching Elijah's arms up high enough to force him to bow forward over the table. Boots. Officer Callahan. Elijah's voice stayed level, almost gentle, despite the burning in his shoulders. You are making a mistake tonight that you will not be able to walk back. Boots. I'd suggest calling a supervisor to this location. Callahan laughed, breathless and a little wild, high on the adrenaline of total physical dominance. Boots. I don't need a supervisor for a couple of nobodies. He patted Elijah down roughly. You're going in for resisting, failure to identify, and disturbing the peace. Boots. He didn't resist, Naomi said, stepping half a pace closer. Callahan spun on her, jabbing a finger toward her chest. Boots. One more step and you're face down on this floor. Turn around, hands on the table. She complied. Her mind, though, was moving fast, running the math on exactly how bad the next 90 seconds could get. Boots. If Callahan searched her thoroughly, he would find the wire. Worse, he would find the federal-issue Glock 19 tucked into her bag, registered to no name that would mean anything to a Millbrook Hollow dispatcher. Boots. He didn't cuff her first. Instead, he grabbed the canvas messenger bag off her shoulder and with a showman's flourish, upended it onto the booth table. Boots. A burner phone, loose cash, a pack of cigarettes she didn't smoke, and at the bottom, wrapped in a strip of dark cloth, the unmistakable weight of a handgun. Boots. Someone in the diner gasped. Doris let out a small, startled cry. Walter's whole posture straightened, chest puffing out with vindication. Boots. Callahan unwrapped the cloth like a man unwrapping a birthday present, revealing the matte black Glock 19. Well, he held it up so Walter could see. Boots. I knew you two were dirty. Could smell it the second you walked in. In the command van, Captain Reyes slammed his palm flat on the console, hard enough to crack his own coffee mug down the side. Boots. They found her sidearm. His voice had gone thin with fury. Where the hell is the chief? Still not answering, sir. Boots. Priya's fingers were already flying across a second keyboard. Units are 3 minutes out. I'm patching us into local dispatch now. Boots. Inside the diner, Callahan hauled Naomi's arms back and snapped the second pair of cuffs onto her wrists, harder than necessary, close enough to her ear that only she could hear him. Boots. You're both looking at hard time. Unregistered firearm, resisting a peace officer. You picked the wrong town to run your little game in. Boots. Check the serial number, Naomi said, her voice eerily calm, stripped of every trace of the fear Callahan so clearly wanted to see. Boots. Run it, right now. I dare you. Something in the phrasing snagged on him. Criminals do not, as a rule, beg an officer to run a serial number, but his pride had already built a wall too thick for the warning to get through. Boots. He keyed his shoulder mic. Dispatch, Unit 6. 2 subjects detained at Whitfield's diner on Poplar. Need a run on a recovered firearm. Boots. He squinted at the barrel and read off a string of digits. 10 seconds passed, then 20. When the radio finally crackled back to life, the dispatcher's voice, a woman named Renee Okafor, 4 years on the job, never once flustered on air until tonight, had lost every trace of its usual boredom. Boots. Unit 6, please confirm that serial number. I already gave it to you, Callahan snapped. Just tell me whose gun it is. Boots. Callahan. A pause, and when she spoke again, her voice had dropped almost to a whisper, as if she were afraid of being overheard by the number itself. Boots. That serial is returning restricted. It's flagged federal. I've got a supervisor override coming through my terminal right now, and there's a federal agent on Channel 1 asking to speak to you directly. Boots. Every sound in the diner seemed to fall away at once. The rain against the tin roof, Doris's ragged breathing, even the low buzz of the fluorescent lights overhead. Boots. Callahan stood frozen in the middle of the aisle, the Glock suddenly feeling, in his hand like it weighed 40 pounds instead of 2. Boots. He looked at Elijah, still cuffed, still bent over the table, and somehow, impossibly, still radiating more authority than the man holding the gun. Boots. What is this? Callahan said, and his voice cracked in a way it hadn't 10 minutes earlier. Some kind of scam? Boots. You think you can spoof a federal database? Naomi let out a short, cold laugh that cut through the silence like a blade. Boots. You really are that slow, aren't you? You're standing on the tracks, staring straight at the headlights, and you still don't believe the train is coming. Boots. Shut up. But there was no weight behind it now. He looked over at Walter Higgins, who had gone gray behind the register, slowly understanding that the men and women he'd helped racially profile were not, in fact, the easy target he'd assumed. Boots. Take the cuffs off, officer. Elijah's tone was almost conversational, as if he were discussing the weather instead of his own unlawful arrest. Boots. Right now. Put the weapon down, step back, and this might still go easier for you than you think. Callahan's face twisted between panic and stubborn, cornered pride. Boots. His whole identity had been built on being the law in this town, and admitting, even to himself, that he might be standing in the middle of the biggest mistake of his career was more than his ego could process in real time. Boots. I'm not taking anything off. You're going to county lockup and detectives can sort out whatever spoofed serial number nonsense you're running. Boots. He never got the chance. Outside, the drumming rain was swallowed by the roar of engines as 3 unmarked black Suburbans tore into the parking lot, jumping the curb, tearing through the manicured hedge Walter Higgins had personally trimmed that very morning, and slamming into formation directly across the diner's front doors. Boots. Hidden light bars erupted in red and blue, flooding the dining room in strobing color. Walter let out a small, pathetic sound and dropped out of sight behind the register. Boots. Before the vehicles had even fully stopped, doors flew open and tactical agents in body armor stamped FBI across the chest poured out, weapons up, moving with a coordinated precision that made Callahan's earlier swagger look like a child playing dress-up. Boots. The glass doors were shoved open hard enough to snap the little brass bell clean off its bracket, sending it skittering across the linoleum. Boots. Striding through the center of that formation was Captain Daniel Reyes, late 50s, soaked trench coat over a suit that had clearly been slept in more than once this week, his expression carved from something that looked a great deal like restrained fury. Boots. He walked straight past Callahan without so much as a glance, crouched beside the booth, and reached for Elijah's wrists. Boots. You good? Better now, Elijah said, rolling his shoulders as the cuffs came free. Reyes rose and turned, finally, to face Callahan directly. Boots. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. Detective Elijah Reid, Detective Naomi Carter, 9 months undercover on a federal narcotics task force that you just walked into wearing a badge and absolutely no idea what you were standing on top of. Boots. He let that sit in the air for a full 3 seconds. Do you have any concept of what you almost cost us tonight? Boots. Callahan's mouth opened and closed twice before anything came out. The manager said they matched a description. I was just... Boots. You were just what? Naomi rubbed at the red marks circling her wrists, her voice quiet, almost gentle, which somehow made it land harder than shouting could have. Boots. Doing your job? Is that the sentence you're about to finish? He didn't answer. There was, for the first time all night, nothing left for him to say. Boots. That was the second frozen moment. Callahan standing in the middle of the aisle with his own gun belt, suddenly feeling like a costume. Tactical agents fanned out around him. Walter still crouched behind the register, and every remaining diner patron staring at the man who, 20 minutes earlier, had walked in believing he owned the room. Boots. Here is what none of them knew yet. Sitting in that ruined diner at nearly midnight, Elijah's grandfather Otis had walked a beat for 22 years in Macon and been passed over for promotion 4 separate times, watched younger, whiter officers leapfrog him with half his record, and had never once, in all that time, gotten so much as an apology. Boots. Elijah had carried that silver dollar into every undercover assignment since the academy, not for luck, but as a reminder of exactly what was riding on nights like this one, and exactly why he refused to let a man like Grant Callahan turn him into a headline about resisting arrest, instead of a case study in what accountability actually looks like. Boots. Reyes turned to Walter Higgins, still crouched behind the counter. You, manager, you want to explain to me why you refused service and called a false report on 2 customers who hadn't said a word to anyone in this diner. Boots. Walter's mouth worked soundlessly. They looked, You thought, Reyes repeated, and something in his tone made even the tactical agents nearby go quiet. Boots. That's going in a report, too. It took less than 4 hours for Millbrook Hollow to learn what had actually happened at Whitfield's diner that night, and less than 4 days for the story to leave Georgia entirely. Boots. Naomi's wire had captured every second of it, every slur dressed up as procedure, every escalation, every moment Callahan had a clean off-ramp and chose instead to keep pressing forward. Boots. Internal Affairs opened a file within 48 hours. It did not take them long to find that this was not, as it turned out, Grant Callahan's first time. Boots. 2 prior complaints surfaced within the first week. A black delivery driver named Curtis Whaley stopped and searched twice in 1 month for matching a description that was never specified, and a college student named Priya Deshmukh held at gunpoint outside a gas station for 40 minutes over a supposedly stolen bicycle that turned out to belong to her. Boots. Both complaints had been quietly closed by the previous chief, with a note reading insufficient evidence. Neither Whaley nor Deshmukh had ever been told the outcome. Boots. Both came forward now, and both testified. The Millbrook Hollow Police Department was placed under a federal consent decree 11 weeks later, stripping Chief Raymond Doyle of operational authority and mandating an outside monitor to review every use-of-force incident and every stop for the next 36 months. Boots. Doyle resigned rather than face the review board. He did not give an interview on his way out. Walter Higgins fared no better. Boots. Once Naomi's wire audio went public, recording of him refusing coffee, waving off Doris, calling in a fabricated report, protests formed outside Whitfield's within the week. Boots. Regulars who had eaten there for 20 years stopped coming. A boycott that started as a hashtag became, within 3 months, a bankruptcy filing. Boots. The neon sign over the door, the one that had buzzed through 15,000 nights of Millbrook Hollow evenings, went dark for good in January, and the building sat boarded and empty through the rest of the winter. Boots. But it was Grant Callahan's reckoning that the whole country ended up watching. The trial began the following spring, in a federal courthouse in downtown Atlanta, with wood-paneled walls that could not have looked more different from Whitfield's cracked linoleum. Boots. Callahan sat at the defense table in an ill-fitting suit that hung differently on him than his old uniform had, his face pale, his hands never quite still. Boots. He had lost 11 pounds since October. He looked, more than anything, like a man who had spent 5 months rehearsing a version of events that kept collapsing every time someone played him the tape. Boots. U.S. Attorney Victor Alvarez, a man with a reputation for taking apart corrupt officers with surgical patience, played that recording for the jury on the second day of trial and let the silence afterward do most of his work for him. Boots. He played it again on day 6. By day 11, even Callahan's own defense attorney had stopped objecting to it. Boots. And through all of it, Grant Callahan never once said the words "I was wrong." He said he'd been following his training. Boots. He said the manager's call had given him probable cause. He said the community had trusted him to keep it safe, and that trust meant something. Boots. Even on the stand, even staring directly at the jury, he reached for justification the way a drowning man reaches for driftwood. Anything that might still float. Boots. It was Judge Eleanor Voss, 61 years old, 20 years on the federal bench, who finally said what no one else in that courtroom had been willing to say directly to his face. Boots. Mr. Callahan. Her voice filled the room without her needing to raise it. You were sworn to protect this community. Boots. Instead, you used a badge and a weapon to terrorize two people whose only offense was sitting quietly in a booth, waiting for a meal, while wearing clothes and carrying skin that did not match the picture in your head of who belongs where. Boots. Your actions were not the product of fear. They were the product of certainty, the certainty that you would never be made to answer for them. Boots. Tonight, you learn otherwise. Something in Callahan's face finally broke. Not the collapse of a man caught in a lie. The collapse of a man who has spent 5 months building a wall between himself and what he did, watching that wall come down stone by stone in front of a room full of strangers. Boots. He put his face in his hands. His shoulders shook. For the first time since the trial began, he wasn't performing anything. Boots. Judge Voss sentenced him to 11 years in federal prison, no possibility of early release, on charges of deprivation of rights under color of law, and ordered him personally, separately, to pay restitution to Elijah Reid, Naomi Carter, Curtis Whaley, and Priya Deshmukh. Boots. The gavel came down like a rifle crack. A collective breath moved through the gallery. As the marshals took him by the arms, Callahan turned back once, and his eyes found Elijah and Naomi sitting together in the third row, dressed now in plain, unremarkable clothes that gave away nothing about who they were. Boots. They didn't smile, they didn't gloat. They simply watched, the way you watch weather finally break after a long, ugly buildup, without triumph, just relief that it was over. Boots. I didn't know, Callahan said so quietly that only the marshals beside him could hear it. I told myself I didn't know what I was doing. Boots. But I did. I think I always did. Nobody answered him. The heavy doors closed, and that was the last anyone in Millbrook Hollow heard from Grant Callahan directly, though his name stayed in the local paper for months. First as a cautionary headline, later, slowly, as something closer to a lesson people actually seemed to learn from. Boots. 6 months after the trial, on a warm evening in October, Elijah Reid sat across a small table from Naomi Carter in a quiet jazz club on the north side of Atlanta, the kind of room where the lighting stays low and nobody's checking a badge at the door. Boots. Operation Nightfall had closed for good that spring. Salvatore Ferraro, the man behind the landscaping company that had never once trimmed a hedge, was serving a 22-year federal sentence for racketeering and narcotics trafficking. Boots. Brought down not by a raid on a warehouse, but by the very same wire that had recorded Callahan's arrest. A recording that later placed one of Ferraro's own lieutenants, a man named Mateo Cruz, at the same diner that night, Boots, close enough to watch the raid unfold, and report back that Marcus Boone and Danielle Reeves were exactly who they'd claimed to be. Boots. The very thing meant to expose them had sealed their cover instead. Elijah reached into his jacket pocket and set the old silver dollar on the table between them, spinning it once with 2 fingers the way his grandfather used to. Boots. You ever think about sending Callahan a thank you card? Naomi said, watching the coin wobble and settle. If he hadn't decided to profile us in a diner, Ferraro never shows his face that night. Boots. I think about it, Elijah said. Then I think about Curtis Whaley and that college kid, Priya. 2 complaints, both buried before us. Boots. We just happened to be the ones with a federal wire on. Naomi was quiet for a moment, turning her glass slowly on the table. Boots. You know what gets me. It's not that he hated us. Hate's simple, you can see it coming. It's that he really believed he was doing his job right up until the second the ground opened under him. Boots. Elijah nodded slowly and picked the coin back up, closing his fist around it. That's the part that should scare people more than the hate does. Boots. They didn't say much else. They didn't need to. The undercover jackets were long since packed away, the aliases retired for good, and somewhere in Georgia a diner sat boarded up while a young man who once believed his badge made him untouchable sat in a cell learning, slowly and far too late, exactly how much that belief had cost. Boots. Some nights, justice doesn't arrive with sirens. Sometimes it just waits patiently for a man to walk into a room, convinced of everything, and hand it the evidence himself. Boots. If this story stayed with you, not because of how it ended, but because you recognize someone in it, maybe even a version of yourself in one of those silent booths, watching and saying nothing, then give it a like so it finds the person who needs to hear it tonight. Boots. Share it with someone who's ever been made to feel like they had to prove they belonged in a room they had every right to sit in. Boots. And before you go, tell me in the comments, have you ever been in that diner, and which side of the booth were you standing on? I read every single one.